Hello, welcome to Will Henry's Workshop, where we strive for excellence, but adequacy is okay. So over the next little while, I'm going to show something that maybe it doesn't even make a lot of sense to do, and something that's not done an awful lot anymore for the very reason that it doesn't make a lot of sense. But because I'm a gunsmith, I do this anyway. What I'm talking about is truing up, or blueprinting, if you will, a Remington 40X. So I'll show you how I set it up to recut the threads, to align the bolt in the bore, and to make sure that everything is square, perpendicular, concentric, wherever these things are applicable. And I'll show you just little tricks that work with my tooling, and try to explain the reasons for doing the various things. Now, this will take a while, so this will be a series of videos, and I'll just do what I can on each one. And as I said, I'll try to explain things as we go. And the thing is that everything that is done with a Remington 40X or a Remington 700 can also be done with any other action, with some adaptations depending on the idiosyncrasies of the action. I use much the same techniques when I'm truing up a Winchester Model 70. And again, the only reason I do this is because I can. It would be a lot easier in most cases to simply phone up and get a bat or Borden or Stiller action, which would probably be a lot straighter than my 40X is going to end up. But in the end, if nothing else, I can say I did it, and success or failure, it's all up to me. Anyway, so I'm just going to pivot you around here so we can see the visual aid where let's get not too much glare here. Where you can see we've got this artistic rendering of a 40X receiver. And with the 40X, quite often the bore of the receiver is actually kind of curved, and especially at the bridge. The bridge is angled upwards, and this is an artifact of the heat treatment, in all likelihood. They're not machined this way to start with, I'm pretty sure. But through the heat treating and so on, you end up with this. And on this receiver, this is the 40X that we're going to be working with. On this one, it's quite evident, and I'll show you. We'll move away from this. But one thing, it'll become evident why I do things the way I do when you think of this curvature. What I try to do in the end, after I find my pen here, what I try to do is to true everything up to a line that goes from the center of this to the center of this. And everything in between doesn't matter. Now, a lot of the 40Xs and 700s, there's tooling made for them where they remount the bore, and presumably that makes it pretty straight. Then they'll get an oversized bolt, or they'll sleeve the entire bolt body in order to get it to fit well. I don't do it that way, and I don't particularly like the method, but there's really nothing wrong with it, and I can't be critical of it. But anyway, so I'm going to turn back around. And after an exciting ride there. So In order to I can demonstrate, as I said, the curvature on this particular action. Now here I have a mandrel that as it happens fits fairly well in this receiver. And you can see when you push that mandrel in and it goes up, when it gets up to the receiver ring, the front, you can see that it contacts at the top and not at the bottom. Now this is only by a few thousandths of an inch, but it's enough that it's evident because as you can see, there's some slop here. And if I turn around and put it in the other end, there's slop there. So at either end, it's sloppy, but when I put them through both, it's tight. And the reason for that is the curvature of that bore. And so we want to take that out of the equation. And so in order to do that, the mandrel that I put in the receiver will contact only here and here. And also, the contact surface back at the receiver bridge will be narrow enough to allow the mandrel to move and center up back here and at the front. So, and I've got the blank for that mandrel in the lathe, and we'll get at that in just a moment. So the first thing we have to do is to determine just how big the bore is. And, something else I was going to show. On this, now this rifle was probably, I think it was purchased around if I remember right, probably around 1971. And my dad bought this, and it's been used quite a bit. And probably not visible on the camera is the wear here at 12 o'clock when the bolt's closed at the top of the bolt in the rear. And that is from the trigger lifting the bolt up against the top of the receiver bridge. And so it wears all on the top. The bottom never even contacts until the rifle's fired. And even then, maybe not. And that's one reason that when you look at Remington 700s and 40X bolts that have seen a little use, quite often it looks like the top lug doesn't contact. And the truth is it doesn't contact as long as the sear is holding the caulking piece up. So that's one of the things we're going to address. And we'll try and get this bolt centered up in the rear of the receiver. And at the front, it'll be centered up by perpendicular lug contact and by the counter bore of the barrel. Here again, there's a lot of debate over whether that bolt should contact the counter bore of the barrel at all. And I kind of have to go along with the people that say it should not. However, what I like to do is set it up with some clearance, and then I'll use a Teflon O-ring, which contacts the nose of the bolt. And that O-ring will center the bolt up, support it, keep it centered, and yet you don't have that hard contact that you would have with the counterbore. Now, further to this, back in the day, as they say, I used to fit the counterbores tight. And in fact, I fit them just about size on, and I used to lap them together with a little JB compound. It didn't take much, so that I had probably a couple 10,000ths clearance, maybe, on that on the circumference of the bolt nose. And the rifles shot very well. Nonetheless, there's enough anecdotal evidence that this might not be a good thing to do that I decided to try and find a way around it while still retaining that alignment feature. And I think I've done that with the O-ring system. Anyway, so the first thing we have to do here is to ascertain, as I said quite some time ago, I believe, ascertain exactly what the size of the bore is. And for that, a person could use an inside mic if he had one that size. I do not. And another thing is a lot of your inside mics that work on this size use 3 contact points, and they won't work in something with 2 slots cut through it, like your locking lug raceways. So we're going to use the common telescoping gauge, and see if we can get down here. Now, the telescoping gauges work very well, but there's kind of a knack to it. And in use, you just you back off your little lock screw here, and so that it contacts with the handle held up at an angle. Then you tighten that up, and you simply pivot down through. And this, in theory, now is the size of your bore. And I say in theory, but it's true in actual fact if you're careful. And I think the important thing to do, I always put the micrometer in the vise, very gently, mind you, and that way I have both hands free. So when you measure this, you measure till it just touches. And in this particular case, we have a diameter at the front of 0.704 0.7044 or 5, yeah, 4.5. So 7044, we'll call it. And now I find that usually, if I'm off at all, these will measure a little bit large. And if they measure small, you've just really messed up the whole thing. So the other thing with the telescoping gauge, I always like to do it at least twice to make sure that my measurement's repeatable. Because if it's not repeatable, again, you've made a mistake. You can't trust your measurement. So by doing it twice, if you get the same reading both times, you can be more assured that you've gotten the right measurement. And so again, just touching, and it's 704. Well, this time I got 7043. So 1/10,000 smaller. And I think that to within 1/10,000 is as good as I can measure with the telescoping gauge. So I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to go for 7044, which I better write this down, pardon me, while I'm, my memory, while it's really good, just doesn't seem to last that long. So 0.7044, and that's what I'll make my mandrel. And if that's too tight, it's a lot easier to knock a tenth off than it is to try and add one. So then of course, I have to check the receiver bridge and see what the diameter is back here, because they're very seldom the same. I'll get up ahead of that screw hole. Okay. And we'll go through the same routine. Okay. Okay, this one gives me 7034. So exactly a thousandth of an inch smaller. And once again, I'll do that again just for confirmation. And again, yeah, 7034. So that's what I'm after. It's 7044 on the front and 7034 for the rear. Now, so I'll turn around. And here in the lathe, I've got, as I said, I've got the blank turned, and I'll just use a caliper for this because we're not to the critical part yet. So I turned the body of this down to 696, 697, 696. So that this definitely doesn't contact at all at either end. And then I have two places here. This is for the rear, this is for the front, and I'll turn them down to the sizes that I determined through measurement, and we'll see if we can't get this mandrel to fit exactly the way we want it to fit. Now, because it's a little larger in the front, again a better front, rear, because it's a little larger in the front, this mandrel, when I'm done, I'll have to turn this knot at this end off, because I'll have to insert it from the front, and this should go through the front easily, and then everything should be fairly snug when I get it in place. And you know, I don't mind if I have a tenth or two of clearance. One thing you don't want is you don't want it to be in there so tight that you have to pound it in or out, because if you have to do that, you might disturb it in the jig, and we'll get to that in a bit. So again, I'm going to just move a little bit, and then I'll get the micrometer. So I can see where we're starting out here. Okay, I'd left these These places are up at about 0.72930. So we'll take a cut and get them down closer to where we want them to be. Now you can see I've set this up between centers, but the center and the headstock, I just put a piece in the four-jaw chuck and turned to center there, so that I know that center is running concentric, and then that way I can set this up between centers, and then the four-jaw chuck's in place and ready to use as the job progresses. Anyway, so we're at 729. So as you recall, at the front we're headed for, we hope, 7.044, and at the rear exactly 1/1000th of an inch smaller than that. So I can take, the truth is, unless you get lucky, you can't turn to within a 10,000th on any lathe, but we do the best we can. And so here we're taking a minuscule cut, and we'll see what we get. And we'll cut just a little more off the other end. Okay, we're at 7036. So we're about 2/10,000ths big there. And here, we're still too big because it didn't cut well on this end. We're still at 706, so this is going to be just a little tricky. .705, so about 6/10,000ths too big here. That's okay. Now, the ideal way to deal with a piece where you want to cut that close would be to use a grinder or I could even set up the tool post grinder. But even at that, grinding is almost more of an art than a science. And again, to get hit within 10,000ths is very difficult. So here I resort to a file. And we just use the cut and measure method. And for right now, I'm going to leave it just a little bit big because while it's not super warm, it's probably about 10 degrees warmer than ambient. So right now I'm at 7048. That's pretty good. And this one is at 703. So this is going to take very little. So I'll use this fine diamond file on it. I'll do the same thing up front here. Okay, we're at 7034, so we're right on there. And here we're at 7045. Should double check that. Yeah, 5 or 6, so just a little more. Actually, I'm going to use a little piece of 240 grit cloth. Just a touch here. Okay. So 704, 4.5, just a little more. Gotta come off there. Still just a little bit fat. As you can see, 240 grit paper doesn't remove an awful lot very fast. So we'll check this rear one. .7033, so it's actually a 10,000 small, and at the front, so we're just at 7044, or a little light of that. So anyway, that's that. That is the mandrel. Now I'll have to turn, as you can see, I got a fat end back here. We'll get rid of that, and then we'll be ready to check it out. So there we go. That's a snug, but not too snug fit. And I think that's going to work out just fine. So having done that, we'll be able to set it up in the jig, and which will be set up in the 4-jaw chuck and the steady rest. There again, I do it just a little bit differently than many others. But, and then once I've done that, I'll recut the threads in the receiver, and I'll take a light facing cut on the locking lug seats. We don't want to move them more than a couple of thousandths of an inch, because we'll also be taking a couple of thousandths off the locking lugs on the bolt probably in order to clean them up. So that's a increase in your headspace measurement of 4 thousandths of an inch, and we don't want to go much further than that, because everything that you do there is also extraction cam that you're losing. So anyway, that's but that's where we're going to stop for now, and all we've done so far is get a mandrel that's specifically made for this receiver. And like I said, along with the mandrel, I'll show you the other items here. Along with the mandrel, I make sleeves that fit over the receiver. And these sleeves, their only purpose is to let me clamp the set screws in the jig onto these, and they'll squeeze down onto the receiver. And by putting the set screws on here, it spreads the distortion that can be caused by the set screws if you tighten them up too tight, and it spreads it out over a larger area, so that you don't distort your receiver ring or your bridge. And in fact, it's quite easy and doesn't take an awful lot of pressure, if you have a close-fitting mandrel like this, to put it in there and tighten up the set screws. And like I said, it doesn't even have to be all that tight. and you won't be able to move the mandrel. So it's pretty easy to distort that receiver, believe it or not. Now it springs right back, but still, if you set it up that way, you've introduced an error. So that's why the sleeves. So these sleeves will go inside the jig, and the set screws will sit against them. And all of that is going to take place in the next video. For now, this is Will Henry, out.